Well, hello there, my fellow ghosts, goblins, and ghouls. It's time to eat, drink, and be scary as we welcome you to a chilling edition of Everything Zen, where we discuss everything in the Zenescope universe from Rise of the Jinn and Bridgewater Triangle to Hellchild, Paradise Court, and so much more. This is Zenescope. I'm your host, Mark Sells, and we're so glad you could join us for our Grimm Tales of Terror themed podcast. It's October, everyone, and we're talking about scary stories, witches, things that go bump in the night, and our annual Halloween special. Speaking of Halloween, did you know that Halloween is actually older than Christianity itself? It comes from a pre-Christian Celtic festival called Samhain, which means summer's end. And it began with a big feast that recognized the final day of the fall harvest with spirits crossing over to the other side. Today, Halloween has become the second largest commercial holiday in the U.S., with Americans spending $8 billion annually. That's quite a lot of candy corn and costumes. This month at Zenescope, we'll be celebrating Halloween in a variety of different ways. Our first ever Halloween Advent Zen Box is available online at Zenescope.com with 13 days of treats. We'll be launching our 13 Days of Halloween Scratch-Off game shortly, where you could win a trip for two to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando. Plus, our biggest virtual con of the year runs October 21st through the 23rd, and I guarantee it will be a blast with special guests, games, collectibles, and prizes. Our Halloween gurus, Chris Samson and Amber Curtis, will have our podcast Word of the Month and fun facts for you in a little bit. We'll be speaking with writer Jay Sandlin about amusement park horrors and the Grimm Tales of Terror Quarterly 2021 Halloween Special. Later in the program, we'll be joined by the incredible Elizabeth Mitchell, whom you know from the hit series Lost as Dr. Juliet Burke. She's on The Expanse, she's on Season 2 of Outer Banks, and so many incredible shows. She'll be stopping by to talk about her latest film, one that's so perfect for this season. It's called Witch Hunt. So grab your goodie bag and put your best costume forward. This edition of Everything Zen is filled with tricks and treats, and it starts right now. In Greek mythology, the Keres were female death spirits. In fact, the Greek word Ker, spelled K-E-R, specifically means death and destruction. The Keres were goddesses who personified violent death and who were drawn to bloody deaths, especially on battlefields. Although they were present during death and dying, they didn't actually have the power to kill. All they could do was wait for humans to die and then feast on the dead. Kind of like vultures or some sort of ghoulish cannibals. In July of 2014, Zenescope released the very first edition of Grimm Tales of Terror. Written by co-founder Ralph Tedesco, Tales of Terror was inspired not just by Greek mythology, but by modern-day urban legends and horror anthologies like Tales from the Crypt, Twilight Zone, and Creepshow. On the literature side, you'll also see many nods to the works of Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and H.P. Lovecraft. In fact, in the very first edition, there's an appearance of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, about a murder committed by the narrator who buries their victim in the floorboards of their home, only to be haunted by a pounding sound they believe to be the victim's heart. Bump, 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 bump. And much like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, the guilt and psychological impacts are so great, they force the narrator to confess. Grimm Tales of Terror reimagines so many creepy stories you may or may not know, and it puts a Zenescope twist on it. As we like to say, keep the lights on and don't read before bedtime. Front and center, and at the very heart of Grimm Tales of Terror, pun intended, is Keres, the goddess of death, who acts as Zenescope's very own crypt keeper, punishing those she deems worthy of her wrath. Many are unsuspecting people who cross her path unwittingly, only to learn a harsh lesson about morality. Greedy treasure hunters, truck-driving predators, game nights with life and death consequences, haunted houses, monsters under the bed, you name it. Tales of Terror has even tapped into true crime this year with the story of H.H. Holmes, one of the first and most notorious serial killers of all time, having confessed to at least 27 murders and believed to have been responsible for almost 200, luring victims into the World's Fair Hotel, later nicknamed the Murder Castle. H.H. Holmes was written by our first guest this month, Jay Sandlin. And we'll be speaking with him in just a little bit, but before we do, let's find out what horrors Chris Samson has concocted with this terrifying edition of podcast Word of the Month.
Welcome. This is Chris Samson, your Prince of Darkness. This week's episode of Everything Zen is sponsored by ZTV, the spookiest, supernatural, and ethereal channel for thrills, chills, and kills, with such programming as the Grimm Tales of Terror, the Bridgewater Triangle, Paradise Court, Satan's Hollow, The Watcher, and more. How do you watch ZTV, you might be asking? Simple! You turn off all the lights in the house, light 3 ceremonial candles, and speak the name Keres over and over until your reflection changes and the world disappears beneath your feet. To celebrate Spooktoberfest and our flagship series, Tales of Terror, we are launching a new podcast Word of the Month contest for this month of October. Whenever you hear the sound during the podcast, we will reveal a secret word or phrase. Email us at info@zenescope.com with that word or phrase, and we will send you a promo code to use on your next purchase on zenescope.com. Remember, ghouls and gals, just one submission per person. We will also be doing a raffle drawing for 3 lucky listeners who participate in our Podcast Word of the Month contest. Our grand prize is a limited edition, secret retailer exclusive, Grimm Tales of Terror, number 7, cover D, by Mike Crome and Ula Moss. There will also be 3 second-place winners who will win a copy of Grimm Tales of Terror, Volume 4, hardcover graphic novel, signed by Joe Brescia. So, listen carefully and email us at info@zenescope.com for your chance to win. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Chris. The podcast contest runs throughout all of October, so you can send an email to info@zenescope.com any day or time up until midnight on Halloween, which is Sunday, October 31st. The winners will all be contacted the first week in November. When witches go riding and black cats are seen, the moon laughs and whispers, 'tis near Halloween. Our next guest is Jay Sandlin. He's the writer behind such Zenescope works as Grimm Universe Presents, Zodiac vs. Death Force, The Neverland Annual, and Grimm Tales of Terror, H.H. Holmes. He's also written this month's Halloween special. A prolific writer, podcast host of What Happens Next, wrestling fan, history buff, horror aficionado, and we'll sprinkle in a touch of Mr. Miyagi. Yep, he's even got a black belt in karate. Jay stopped by to share his thoughts on the creation of Nightmare Land, the horrific amusement park that lies at the center of Grimm Tales of Terror Quarterly 2021 Halloween Special. We'll talk about his early comic book writing days, his successful 5-issue miniseries about 90s pro wrestling, Over the Ropes, and most importantly, we'll find out all about his favorite Halloween candy. Here's how our conversation went. Everybody, we're here with writer extraordinaire Jay Sandlin.
Hey, wonderful to be here.
First of all, I want to ask you, when did your interest in writing first begin, and were comic books part of your early years?
That would be probably the 2nd and 3rd grade. Miss Wooten's class. Shout out to Lynn Wooten, now still rocking it at the River Hill School. Go Bears. In her class, I would probably sit in the back and draw I did two things when I started writing, and I'm not just blowing smoke right now. I did draw comics about a little character, a little cartoon fun Garfield character in one notebook. But then I had a darker and a little more sinister notebook that I kept on the side that was literally called Jay's House of Horrors. Jay's House of Horrors was me in the standard, like the black and white notebooks with the duct tape on the back or whatever.
Yeah.
The public school notebook. You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
I wrote my 3 to 5 page stories, which for a third grader who had ADD, those two notebooks helped me get through a lot of school days that felt very long. And so did the Timothy Zahn novels, the Thrawn trilogy, Shadows of the Empire, the Young Jedi Knights books from Bantam in the 90s. That was what got me through school. Those were definitely the best friends I had there. And that's where my writing really started.
Comic book writing is a bit of a niche. It's not like writing a novel. Or journalism, really. What writing were you doing before you ended up at Mad Cave Studios? And what was the submission process like for you? How did you really break in?
Well, okay. So I mentioned starting writing early, and then I replaced it in my life. The famous Miss Wooten will also recall I did my first stage play as a kid actor in the 3rd grade. And from age 8 to 18, I didn't write much, but if I did, I wrote a 1-act play and entered it into the acting and thespian and Trumbauer competitions. My life was competitive theater in high school. I was highly competitive and went to the world convention that they have in Lincoln, Nebraska. Shout out Troop 2273. And that was where my writing was. But to the answer of Mad Cave and how it got to comics, I just never stopped reading comics. But like you say, Mark, it's so niche that I read comics at every point of my life. No matter what I was into at the time, I was finding a way to read comics. But it was not until, I was in my 20s, mid-20s, and I was depressed and working in a cubicle, and I felt like Bob Cratchit in the 21st century. And I thought, man, I love comics. Why have I never thought about writing comics? Well, first writing in general, because I imagined prose first. I thought that I wanted to be Ray Bradbury or Timothy Zahn. Mad Cave's submission process was the talent search. But before that, I had published 2 things. I published a self-published book that was like a superhero. It was supposed to be alternate history meets superheroes, because I was working on my master's degree at the time in history. You know that thing where you don't want to study too much for one class, so you try to use the same research materials for both? I came up with what I thought was just this brilliant epic of sort of a Watchmen style meets, I don't know. It felt like a Watchmen meets The Americans type thing, but maybe more golden age superhero pulp. That's it. It was pulp meets Watchmen. So it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. And I've since taken the book out of print. I don't think it sold more than 100 copies, but if you can find Outbreak Mutiny, just burn it, because I didn't know how to write at the time. I thought writing was just swirling everything in your head and dumping it out on the page because of my ADD. I won Mad Cave's talent search in 2018. It was their inaugural talent search. I don't know why they picked me, but Chris Fernandez was the one who got on a Zoom, Skype, whatever chat and told me. Chris Fernandez remains a close friend to this day and someone trusted in this industry, as everyone else at Mad Cave Studios, including Mark London, Brian Hawkins, the other talent search winners who I've gotten close to, guys like Stoney. What's up, balded, bearded? We have been shoulders for each other. and I'm not as close with some of them as I'd like to be. And I check in with some of them more often than others. I guess it feels like a graduating class between us.
Talking about Over the Ropes and your obsession with wrestling in the 90s.
I was just going to tell you, I went to one of my earliest wrestling memories was Sting on 1995 TBS, the Superstation, which, living in Alabama, the Superstation was like Netflix meets Hulu with the Prime subscription. That's your Alabama streaming in the 90s. And I saw this ad. It was just a 15-second commercial with Steve Borden, a.k.a. Sting, my favorite wrestler of all time. And he says this whole thing of, I don't wear a suit to work, and my coworkers are 300-pound men who want to pound me into the ground. And then he's at the desk with the suit on and his face paint and the white flat top surfer look he used to have. And he's got his hands behind his head and he says, just another day at the office. And I just thought that was the coolest shit ever. And man, I watched Sting, and the exciting characters that got me into it were the WCW cruiserweights. I went to go see WCW Thunder in 1998 in Birmingham, Alabama. Man, you remember Bam Bam Bigelow?
Yeah.
He was like 300 pounds with the flaming skull head tattoo. And he can do a moonsault off the top rope, just backflip. Yeah, I yelled at him when I was 11 and called him a wide load, and he turned around and told me to fuck off. And I was not even on a close row. So yes, I love wrestling. I have been hyper-focused on like the history of wrestling. When I was working on my that master's for history, I even wrote one of my big papers about comparing Roman gladiators to pro wrestlers, because they were basically the same things. So I wrote Over the Ropes thinking of a gladiator, but set in the South and in the 90s. And that's when I loved wrestling. And I just knew from then on, that was the first point. I was like, that's where this whole story will stem from. It's a Southern wrestling territory at the end of the 90s, when that style of the business was dying because of the Superstation and cable TV.
I love that. You also wrote, and you mentioned this earlier, but Grimm Universe presents Zodiac versus Death Force.
Oh, yes, I did.
The Neverland Annual this year, H.H. Holmes. And my question is, how did you get first connected with Zenescope, and what was it like working with Dave Franchini and the team?
Working with everyone is a blast. I first got connected with Zenescope through Ralph Tedesco when he came on my podcast, Geekopedia. Ralph recorded an episode, and then I lost the recording, and I felt like a dumbass because I'm thinking, great, now Ralph Tedesco, who I approached, for this interview and said, hey, would you like to come on my podcast? And he actually did. And now I have to say, I totally botched and lost that recording. Do you want to come back and do it again? And, I figure if he can't, it's like, Ralph's a nice guy. If he can make it, or we'll just schedule another time. And he laughed, I think, and said, I didn't expect to hear that, but sure. And he came back again. And then he connected me. It was probably a few months later, but it was about this time last year. So let's say between now and November, he just connected me with Dave, and it was a casual, here's Jay, hello. And Dave said, the process that I'm, giving you is here. I'll send you a couple of pitches. You can make them and go from there. And now I got to mention my friend again, Brian Hawkins. My friend Brian Hawkins is a writer who, I don't know what this is, but we keep showing up at the same place at the same time. And I love it every time we meet. But Brian and I were both independently going through this process at the same time and didn't know it. Because I think we wanted to tell each other the result after we knew. But Dave gave us both the opportunity to say, here's, you can do Gretel Dark Watchers. Give us your best pitch for it. 3 pages, short outline type thing, not a detailed outline, a synopsis more or less.
Yep.
And Brian did, he pitched for Gretel and not H.H. Holmes. And I think I pitched for both of them and thought that my Gretel pitch was stronger. But they chose Brian for Gretel and gave me H.H. Holmes. And I don't know why Dave did it, but I think it might be because I mentioned that I thought I would be good for that because I've sold life insurance for 10 years. And that's how H.H. Holmes got all his kills paid for. And I'm like, I think I could recognize some of the ways, some of the terminologies. Like it was great to be able to slip some of they call it the day job or the secret identity. It shouldn't be a secret because I want to get more of my things together. I've owned J. Sandlin Agencies, which is my company, and we're in 4 states, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Georgia, providing auto, home, life, etc., retirement. So with me, I'm able to slip into the script like, oh, who should you designate as your beneficiary? We'll put your employer in case of your untimely death. And luckily, this policy does include a provision for accidental death. And H.H. Holmes is just, there's a character in that book, Esme, and people have asked me if she's based on a historical character from that time. She's not, but she's just indicative of how he treated everyone in his path as a potential corpse to collect on. So I got H.H. Holmes, and I finally shared it with Brian, and then he shared with me that he got Gretel, and I laughed my ass off and said, will you just show me your synopsis? And we compared notes, and ours were pretty close in the Gretel stories. His went in a direction that I think brought out the Dark Watchers more. And when I read that comic, I knew it did. So Brian, you still owe me a signed one, Gretel and a beer, and I'll trade you an H.H. Holmes when I see you, bud.
I was wondering if writing something like H.H. Holmes, having that real life component, was more enjoyable than a story that is completely, fiction, completely made up.
I don't think I like one more than the other. I've got a monthly comic running right now with Black Box, for instance, called Gen Hunter. You and I, Zenescope and Jay with Black Box both released a Gen comic in the same month. Go figure. That is all high fantasy and thus made up. So that's that genre, and I put my mind in that. But I don't quite agree with the premise of your question, because even high fantasy is going to have roots in the real life world of mythology, of our stories. For instance, in Gen Hunter, there are Muslim, Christian, and Jewish, Talmud and Torah type influences, as well as characters from Greek mythology and just the jinn in general, which come from ancient Islam. That man was born of clay and the jinn was born of fire. So I use a lot of history, if it's a high fantasy or if it's based on H.H. Holmes, who was someone that, man, I loved going back and watching some documentaries about him. I'd not thought about him in a long time, but it really kicked in a lot of, I did spend some time before really writing that script, probably more than usual. So I guess you could say in that case with H.H. Holmes, I felt like for me personally, the best move was more research, but the high fantasy, those things kind of come into the script or get peppered in through your editing process, which is equally important in comics as it is in prose, by the way. It's just different.
Now, Grimm Tales of Terror Quarterly, the 2021 Halloween special, as we're calling it, is about an amusement park gone awry.
No, dude, let's just call it Disney on acid.
Poor Dreamland. Without too many spoilers, what can you tell our listeners about the story and its inspiration?
It is 72 pages, a one-shot. It takes place at what is normally Dreamland theme park, like you just said. 11 months out of the year, Dreamland is like your Disney World or Six Flags, happy-go-lucky. But when the Halloween season comes, there's a switch that flips, and it becomes Nightmare Land. And this was Dave Franchini's big influence, that he wanted it to be like when Disney rebrands. And I think I can share without spoiling too much that he also, Dave, was interested in an organization that is inside the lower levels of Disney World. And I was trying to think of the best way to do it. I overthought it so much. And David had to kind of get me to the simplest idea that I had, which was, Jay, let's just go with your dreamland to Nightmare Land.
Do you have a favorite Nightmare Land tale, and why?
Well, that is a tough question, and I'm going to just go out and tell you that I have a lot. I like them all in their own ways. I'm going to say it's tied, okay? Second runner-up is story number 2, which is called 7 Undead Seas. That is essentially a hate group in the park that is handing out their hateful literature, gets to go on a zombie pirate ride. So what happens if the Pirates of the Caribbean develop an actual taste for human flesh? Arr, ladies, yeah. Oh boy, David had to pull me way back on the pirate speak in the first draft. Dude, I think I sounded like the dialogue for the actual Disney pirates, because I was just going, "Arr, matey, are you ready?" And he's like, Jay, we get, they're pirates. They'll see this, Jay. The reader will see they're pirates. But it's tied with the Hell Coaster story. It's a river, gothic versions of the Riverdale kids take a roller coaster to hell, where they're confronted with their drug dealing sins.
What is your favorite Halloween candy?
I love Reese's. I love Reese's and the peanut butter. I was a picky kid, and I would only eat originally Junior Mints. Do you ever remember Junior Mints?
Love Junior
The
Mints.
Seinfeld episode where Kramer and Jerry...
In the surgery. Yeah.
And Kramer's like, "Why didn't you take it, Jerry?" "It's a Junior Mint. Why would anyone refuse it?" And, you know, I watched a lot of that. My dad and I watched so much Seinfeld growing up. And I love Junior Mints, Reese's, Twix. Today, if I'm getting any candy, I'm just taking like what my son will let me sneak from his bag. It's actually become a problem because he has made candy stashes and secret snack stashes around the house. And it's because he thinks I'm going to eat them. And I found one of the stashes, though, unfortunately, by following a trail of ants, because the stash stays so secret, he forgot about it.
Oh. My last question for you today. What's up next for you? Will there be more Grimm Tales of Terror in the future?
That's up to you guys at Zenescope. If you'll have me back, I'll write as many as you want. I'll be honest, if it's not next for me, but it's on my wish list. If I ever got to go back and do a follow-up to H.H. Holmes, I've got an idea. A lot of people felt that the character Declan was unresolved, and for that story, I'll just tell you all, he was resolved. That's been a question I've got a lot. Doesn't mean I don't have more for him later, and it's not official. I don't know. I think it's a one-shot officially, but in my headcanon, it could spread into H.H. Holmes in the larger Grimm universe. That's a very dark story. And then more for me is Gen Hunter. My monthly title continues. You can pick that up monthly as your local comic shop has them, or at blackboxcomics.com. Digital is being released on Comixology, and it's about a month behind, though. You know how that queue is backed up right now. But you will get those on Comixology as they're released. And then my one that I'm really starting to get my focus on after Halloween is World Class, 200-page original graphic novel with me, Maverick Studios, Patrick Mulholland, shout out Ireland, Patrick Mulholland, and Rebecca Nolte on colors, and Justin Birch is on the letters. We have an all-star team of a European football tournament that's like Ted Lasso meets Cobra Kai.
Jay, thanks so much. Really pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to our next conversation.
The pleasure's all over here. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Zenescope, for all of this.
If you'd like to learn more about Grimm Tales of Terror, stop by Zenescope.com, and midway down the homepage, you'll see a section entitled Grimm Tales of Terror 101. It's got all of the early editions in pristine hardback covers, as well as single issues. And if you're looking for the 2021 Halloween special, mark your calendars. It releases on Wednesday, October 20th. Moving forward, let's take a look at some of the exciting events coming up on the Zenescope calendar for October 2021. The 2021 Halloween Advent Zen Box is simply the most beautiful Zen box we've ever made. It has a top quality finish and construction. It has incredible artwork inside and out, and it includes 13 unique gifts for the Halloween season. Open it one day at a time and savor it, or go through all of it at once. There are unique items like a Halloween metal card, a one-of-a-kind original sketch cover, a limited edition 400 or less collectible, and lots more. No two boxes are the same, and best of all, it will connect with our holiday Advent Zen Box releasing in November. So check them out on Zenescope.com. They're going super fast and won't last. New releases every Wednesday this month include our 2021 Halloween special featuring Nightmare Land, final episode of Adam F. Goldberg and Hans Rodionoff's three-part series, Possessive, which concludes with Todd and his ghoul friend, and a Grimm spotlight that has Cinderella in a zombie apocalypse. Plus, the cyber madness continues for Sky in Grimm Fairy Tales Volume 2, number 53, out on October 27th. The new metal comic, metal cards, serial cosplay, and sticker set have all been released for October and are available for subscription on Zenescope.com. And the fifth and final edition of Elias Chatzudis's classic fairy tale collectibles, featuring Robin Hood, will be released on Fairy Tale Friday, October 29th. Sun Kumanaki is our August featured artist of the month, and that means new art prints, stickers, and metal cards, plus her monthly movie club series, which pays homage to the 1985 classic Fright Night. There's also a ton of new merchandise coming out that includes a brand new sketchbook, coffee mug, fall Zen box, a dozen more CGC books, a trick-or-treat secret bag with exclusives, and for our Collectors Club fans out there, the month concludes with the October holiday cover from Mike Crome on Halloween Day. And finally, don't miss the Granddaddy VCON of them all on October 21st through October 23rd. Zenescope's annual Horror Con has Ralph, Chris, Amber, and Jason as your Halloween hosts. You can expect lots of Halloween collectibles sprinkled throughout, lots of fun and games, a costume contest, and a handful of surprise guests. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. Zenescope loves Halloween. That's October 21st through the 23rd. Check our Facebook page for the live stream details.
Welcome to another installment of Chris's Corner, the spookiest place for reviews within these Shadowlands. Today, I am reviewing the Grimm Tales of Terror Special Edition softcover graphic novel. This is a short but entertaining introduction to our flagship horror series that sports 5 best-selling short stories from the Tales of Terror Volumes 1 and 2. Vignettes include Bloody Mary, The Boogeyman, A Killer Hook, Black Cat, and The Monkey's Paw. The general appeal of the Tales of Terror series is that it adapts, reinvents, and subverts classic ghost stories, superstitions, and urban legends into new and fresh narratives. And there's no required reading order, and each story evokes a different voice and vibe owing to the diverse team of writers and artists that rotate between stories. Now, I don't want to spoil all the tricks and treats that appear in this particular graphic novel, so I'll start with the first story, Bloody Mary, which originally appeared in Grimm Tales of Terror, Volume 1, Issue number 7. Written by our fearless leader, Ralph Tedesco, and with artwork by Joel Yoheda and Eleonora Carlini, we see our lead hero, Mary, in what seems to be a less than ideal living situation. Still in grief over the loss of her mother, her angst and frustration leads her to lashing out against her new stepmother despite her good efforts, Louise. Mary's thoughts linger on the possibility of foul play. To distract herself from these dark thoughts, Mary and her friends play a game of Bloody Mary during a sleepover party, and soon, Mary is haunted by a vengeful and angry spirit that only she can perceive. Unsure of its intentions, and despite her fears and doubts, Mary seeks out answers based on the Revenant's cryptic messages. What is delightful about the story is that it preserves the original Bloody Mary folklore elements, specifically how the ritual acts as a way of divination for young women to glean into the future, the fate of their familial and marital lives. Ralph Tedesco pushes and adapts his legend further by providing a new wrinkle into the lore, that the Bloody Mary spirit is also a spirit of vengeance, an avenging ghost. And as a side effect, it transforms the tone from the story from that of a traditional ghost story into a more complex mix of psychological thriller and supernatural neo-noir. Our talented art team, backed up by colorist Fran Gamboa and JC Ruiz, really bring life to the ghost with intense visceral attention and a terrifying presence that would make J-horror icons Sadako and Kayako proud. The Grimm Tales of Terror special edition graphic novel at the low price of $9.99 is simply a fun, bite-sized entry into the world of horror, and it has something for everyone. It has slasher stories, psychological thrillers, and even a bit of cosmic horror. And by no means we're just limited to this. I mean, we have amazing titles such as The Watcher or Bridgewater Triangle, which just released on our web store, and Peekaboo. So many titles for thrills and chills. I love it. Check it out today at Zenescope.com. That's it for Chris's Corner. Have a happy Spooktober, and back to you, Mark.
For those listening for our podcast Word of the Month, the word for October should come as no surprise. It's Keres. That's spelled Keres, our goddess of death and hostess of Grimm Tales of Terror. I'm thrilled to introduce our featured guest this month. She's an award-winning actress who made her mark as Juliet Burke on the ABC hit drama Lost. She's also had leading roles in such television series as V, Revolution, and Dead of Summer, as well as many recurring roles on Outer Banks, Once Upon a Time, The Expanse, and ER. Plus, she's appeared in over a dozen feature films that include Frequency, Nurse Betty, and The Purge: Election Year. She also embodies the role of Mrs. Claus in the Santa Claus films, which is in contrast to her latest feature, Witch Hunt, a thriller about real-life witches hunted by government authorities and a family that is part of an intricate network to save them. Co-founder Ralph Tedesco and I had the opportunity to catch up with Elizabeth to find out more about Witch Hunt and modern-day morality tales, what it was like being stuck on that island on Lost all those years, and the interesting backstory behind the new antagonist on the Netflix hit series, Outer Banks. We're taking a pause from treasure hunting in the Outer Banks and hiding witches in California, and we're so thrilled to have Elizabeth Mitchell with us here on Everything Zen.
Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So let's dive right in. I know you started out your acting career in theater.
I did.
Can you talk a little bit about that? And what initially drew you to pursuing a career in acting?
Oh, that's such a great question. My mom was putting herself through law school when I was little. So it was just us. And she took me to a local theater and I watched the actors. I was really small and I took some classes there and I fell so in love with it. I fell so in love with the actors. I fell in love with what they were creating out of nothing. I fell in love with the smell and the feel of the whole theater. That was it. I was hooked from that moment on. And I was one of those kids who was, not a latchkey kid, but a kid who was just dropped off at the theater. Right. And I was there most of my young life and never really stopped. Still find it to be one of my favorite places.
You're still getting dropped off at the theater then?
I think so, in my mind.
Was that in Dallas then?
I was in Dallas, yeah.
Okay.
It was the Dallas Theater Center, Kalita Humphrey. It was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it was this very cool building that was all no right angles, so tons of circles, little crazy little paths behind everything, an incredible stage with great sound. It was just it was a very cool place to grow up. So that was my love for it. The film and television part, I didn't even think that was a possibility. I didn't know anyone who had done it, and it seemed outside the realm of what was possible. But
Right.
I just thought, well, if I can perform in my local theater and do what I love and do this crazy magical thing, then I'll do whatever I need to do during the day to make that happen. And it just worked out differently.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
From high school, you went into acting in college at Stevens College, I believe in Missouri.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how you ended up at the British American Drama Academy and how different that experience was over in the UK versus here in the States.
Well, I had this amazing acting teacher in college at Stevens named Brett Prentice, and he was very cool and a classically trained actor, and he taught that way. So my BFA was under his tutelage, and I really liked him. And he's the one who suggested the British American Drama Academy because he thought it would fill in whatever we hadn't learned so far. So I went there and had a little bit more of a classical training and a lot of Shakespeare and a great deal of Chekhov and enjoyed all of it tremendously because I had, teachers like Fiona Shaw would come in and teach an improv class, or, Juliet Stevenson, or any of these incredible just pillars and heroes of mine from the theater would come and teach some of these classes. And I also got to watch a lot of theater for very little. There's a huge student discount, or there was at the time. And every time I wasn't in school, I would just take, the tube, or I would take any kind of public transportation, end up at the theater and just walk in and once again become a little theater rat for the most part.
Right.
Picking up crumbs.
Before we get to Witch Hunt, Ralph and I were kind of talking about this before you hopped on, but we really have to talk about Lost.
Yeah.
Maybe just for a little bit.
I just heard of the show yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he's making that up. Your character, Juliet, was one of the most memorable characters on the show. Mysterious, icy, conflicted. With all the secrecy, the plot twists, the script changes, was it difficult to really sink your teeth into the character and evolve the character throughout the course of the show?
That's a fun question. With the secrecy, I liked the secrecy. It helped me create something that was interesting to me. And I think sometimes we struggle in life because we want to please people. We want to do what we're supposed to do, right? We want to be good. And it took that pressure off of that. I just got to create this odd character that was interesting to me in a little bit of a bubble and had no idea if it was liked or not liked, or was going along the lines of what they wanted or didn't want, or it gave me tremendous freedom to not know. And I always said the same thing when people would ask. I said, we don't know in life what's going to happen next. And that makes us present, and it makes us able to be in there and work on acts of faith. And you have to go with the flow because it's going to flow on without you if you don't.
So when you're making choices for this character, you're just going off instinct at this point, right? Like, because you don't know where they're going to go with this character at this point.
So much instinct, so much what I get from my fellow actors. Juliet was so trapped and on an island, and I found that I was too, right? Yeah, and things happened to her, and she had to respond to them, and it was very similar to what was happening, that the scripts would happen to me. I didn't influence them. I didn't have, so it worked really well for me because I got to do my thing and do it to the full extent of my ability, stretching out in all directions. And I made choices, and then whatever choices I made, they would either go with, or we'd find a course correction. So,
right.
So I loved it. I like the not knowing. It's fun when someone else has a vision and you just get to play in it. It doesn't mean that's always the way that I like. I like having my own visions and making those happen as well. But when someone has a very, very strong vision of what they want. And it's like you get to be in their painting. You've jumped into their painting. And I like that.
Do you think, this is a side question and you don't have to answer,
my question.
do you think the writers knew? Do you think, they might not have even known at that time where this character was going, I assume?
Gosh, I have no idea what they thought for Juliet. I feel like they knew quite a lot, but I also think that what they do with all the actors is they would cast them and then they would sit down and talk to them. You know, I don't think that it was, I don't know what the plan was, but I don't think that it was a coincidence that I have sisters and Juliet happened to have a sister that she loved so much. Do you know, like, I think it's things that we found to be so, things that would draw from us were obviously in some ways sometimes pulled from the actor and sometimes just where they were going. But I found all of their choices hit hard emotionally for me. And I can't think that that's a coincidence, but maybe they're just that brilliant. And that's okay.
Well, that's part of it probably too.
Yeah. No, they are. I mean, they are. Damon's like, come on. Like, he's just so good, right? And Carlton, they're extraordinary filmmakers.
Of course.
Yeah. With the show completed and explained for the most part, is there one thing that fans of Lost would be surprised to learn now, years later?
Oh gosh, I can't think that there's anything because it's been really gone over quite a lot.
Right. Now there's like books on it and like all this.
Yeah, and everyone's kind of told their perspective. I mean, what hasn't happened is none of the actors have really put out a book, on the day-to-day filming, but the interviews were fairly comprehensive that we all did. I don't think that the audience had, at this point in time, with as much as we've gone over it, had a different experience than what we had, Maybe Damon and Carlton will come out with some sort of a crazy something that we never imagined. But I think at this point, the audience knows as much as the actors for sure.
Do you have, I know shooting in Hawaii must have been really hard.
Honestly, my life is so difficult. I go to beautiful places with beautiful people, and I'm exhausted.
That must be real, yeah. Well, when they were like, we're shooting in Hawaii, you're probably like, damn it. Do you have like a fondest memory of filming? Like, I know like there's probably a billion of them, but like, is there one that sticks out?
I loved filming with Evangeline. We became really close during Lost and are still close today. And I just treasure her beyond reason. I think she's extraordinary. But I think that my most treasured memories, and this is going to sound so strange, were driving to work. I had a moon roof, and the actual moon was out there. It was that Hawaiian moon. I would be going over my work for the day. I would be having so much gratitude and this feeling of joy with the work that I would get to do and the people that I would get to work with. And I just think those soft, quiet, 4 a.m. beginnings were some of my favorite times, knowing I was going to go get to do something that I loved. That was probably my favorite, but I loved working with all the actors. They always just astonished me, and Josh made me laugh like crazy. And
I just realized Josh is in my friend's new show coming out.
Really? What's the show?
He's starring in it's okay. I don't
know it either, but it's his new show. That's fantastic.
The new show on HBO.
I saw that. It looked good.
Yeah, my friend Latoya created it with JJ.
Oh, that's amazing! I just saw that. Thing for that.
Yeah. Good. And he's starring, which I was hoping, like, I love him. I think he's an amazing actor.
He's an amazing actor.
I was waiting for him
to do something really wonderful, right?
Yeah, of course.
Good.
So,
me too. You always love to see the people that you love do something wonderful, right?
And Latoya was on this podcast, Mark, in case you remember.
She was. Awesome. Well, we have to switch gears now and jump into Witch Hunt. And there's this really interesting premise behind the film because it plays on, both definitions of the term, as we're shown right at the start of the movie. What's the film about, and how is your character critical to the story?
What a fun question. So Witch Hunt is based on the premise that witchcraft is real and it's being policed. Women are being policed, persecuted, tracked down, burned for being witches in present day in the present day world. My character is a mom. She has 3 children, 2 young boys and a young teenage girl. And she also runs a safe house for witches. So she hides these young and sometimes older women and helps them reach Mexico, which is the safe place. It's the place that you can go to get out of the fear of being persecuted, of the fear of being chased and caught and taken into custody and taken to a camp and all of those things. And Martha is in her way integral because she plays along with the society that she's in. However, underneath that, she's entirely subversive. She is doing everything she can to do what she believes is right, which is to save these women's lives and puts herself and her entire family at risk. And that's, I think I covered it.
That was good.
You got it all in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of socio-political statements, allegories in the film. There's marginalized groups, police states, an underground railroad of sorts. There's a fear of women in power.
That's how I see it. That's interesting that you would say that, because people have had different thoughts, but that, to me, that was the central thought on this, was that fear of women in power, women and their power.
So were there any of these in particular that drew you to being part of the film itself? Was it the fear of women in power?
I do love working with women, and I think there was and is so much going on where women are feeling afraid of having their rights taken away, afraid of being policed, afraid of becoming property again. And I do feel that this film touches on that in a way that is, hopefully entertaining. I was also drawn in by Gideon because I think she's tremendous. And I loved talking to Elle. I had the most extraordinary talk with Elle in preparation after I had read the script and already fallen in love with the character. So I was pretty much a goner, but I liked her idea of it. I liked what she wanted to do. I think her world building skills are extraordinary, and that usually is what draws me in. And as far as the parallels to what's happening in the world, they're there and they're strong, and whatever appeals to you or draws you in or what you think is happening is probably what's happening. I have found that every single person I've talked to sees it from a different perspective, and it usually has something to do with the struggle that they're going on with in their lives. So for me, sure, it was women's power and the fear of women's power and the fear throughout history of strong women, of powerful women.
What was it like working with an up-and-coming director like Elle? We're actually going to go out with a project to her.
You are.
Yeah, we have a script based on one of our comic books, and
you guys, she's so good. She's so good that she's so precise and she's so smart, and she is one of those women and directors who comes in and takes control of her set, and her crew respects her and her actors respect her. And at the same time, we all feel held up in a way that enables us to do our best work, feel supported while we're doing it, but also feel like someone is clearly in charge. And that's not always the case. And when you have a weak director, other people have to rise up and try to fill those spots. And that's not the case with her. But she is also collaborative. She'll listen. She's very curious about what people have to say or what we can do to make it better. And if there's a good idea in the room and it's not hers, she'll take it. She's like, yes, of course, that makes it better. Yeah, but she is, she's amazing. I'm so happy you guys are doing that. It's wonderful.
Yeah, no, her name had come up, and then we watched this movie, and it was just kind of like, oh wow, like that. And we've been I'll tell you a little bit more off air, but it's a really
I'm nuts about it. Yeah, nuts about her. She's one of the best directors that I've ever worked with, and the fact that she is so young, it didn't even come into play. Except that she's adorable, and you kind of marvel at her.
Right. That's always it's always great when somebody's naturally good at a younger age. So you worked in you've done a lot, and you've worked in so many different genres. Which is I think there's a real testament to how good of an actor someone is when you could cross genres that easily. Do you have a favorite to work in? And if so, why? Like, what do you think?
Oh, I love it. I'm a big reader. And from a young age, I have read fantasy and I have read sci-fi and I have read graphic novels and I have read everything I can get my hands on. And I think what I was drawn to in those genres was the fact that powerful women were allowed. Right. And not only allowed, but celebrated. So I suppose it's just from a young age, it's always brought me comfort to read about women, to read about female protagonists and antagonists in fantasy, in sci-fi, in these genres, because I think they've always allowed to be as strong as they can be. And it was accepted because of the fantastical circumstances. So that's why I'm drawn to these roles, and probably always will be. I mean, that's what's on my nightstand. I have Saga, and I have like all of these kind of wonderful, wonderful books that take me into another world, but I think are grounded in something that we all want.
We gotta get Elizabeth some Zenescope graphic novels now.
Please do.
Well, that's going to happen.
It's going to happen now.
I'm like crazy, you guys. You can send me anything you want, and I will read it and love it. Yes, I am a fan.
So, what's more fun to play as an actor, the villain or the hero, and why is it the villain?
Oh gosh, I love both. So here's the thing. I know, of course, it is the villain, but it's interesting though about good guys, about heroes, right. And that is that I think we all have a want to be good. We want to be liked. We want the world to think we're good. The problem with that is that we have to make other people bad sometimes in order to stay the best person in the room. So that's where I think the villains come in. I think that villains are people who desperately want to be good. And what they have done is they have recreated the world around them to fit their being good. And that's how they do terrible things, is they convince themselves that they're the good guy. And
the villain never sees themselves as the villain.
Those are my favorite.
It's interesting when you're writing a villain in something, like when I'm writing a graphic novel and you're writing a villain, and sometimes you're like, well, why is this guy such a prick? You have to have a reason. Yeah. As a writer, give yourself a reason to make otherwise it just doesn't make sense. They're just being an asshole.
And you have to love them. And I don't think we can find the humor in people unless we love them. Right. I mean, I think as an actor, sure. I can't find the humor in something unless I love them, because we find that humor in pain with the love of it, right? Like that's where we get to. So I always have to find a way in. I can't just out and out hate them, but sometimes they're definitely reprehensible.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of villains, one of my favorite summer escapes during the pandemic has been Outer Banks.
So good.
And you joined season 2 with this really amazing character, Carla Limbri. She's rich, she's powerful, she's dying.
She's a mess.
She is. How did you find this character's voice? What did you draw upon?
She was such a struggle for me. But I grew up with women who lied outright and maybe told the truth around children, because children always get to see the truth behind people who are putting up fronts, right? So part of me had always hated those women because they cause harm, So I was fascinated by her because she scared me, and because I really have such I just don't like those women. So I didn't like her, and she scared me, and I couldn't think of a way in, and I thought, well, I have to do that. Right. And honestly, that was it. That was it. She was, she is failing in health. She has her crutch. She is angry, and she is bitter, and she is entitled, and she is terrified. And I thought it was great fun.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm not going to put you on the spot, because we know that season 3 hasn't been confirmed by Netflix yet, but my gut is telling me that Carla's going to have a very big part in how this show plays out.
That would be so fun. If that happens, that would be so fun. Jonas and Josh, they are really extraordinary showrunners and director, and I really I liked working with them. I like working with all those cameras. They use a lot. It feels like you're on stage. There's a lot of improv, so I would be happy to work with them anytime. And I really loved all the actors. They were kind and funny and irreverent and just so good.
Well, we're looking out for season 3 confirmation soon. Sure. We'll see where that goes. So you're no stranger to Comic-Con, right? No. You've done your fair share of Comic-Con.
I have, because I did Lost, and then I did V right after, and then I did Revolution. So we had our fair share.
And then you did The Expanse, right?
And I did The Expanse.
Yeah. So okay, so we've done a million Comic-Cons with our company. What are your, like, do you notice differences between like your fan bases? Because you have these like iconic, you have Lost, you have V, you have Once Upon a Time. Like, are there differences, or like what like do you typically, like, for example, recognize you from Lost as somebody, would that person be a little bit different than somebody who might recognize you from The Expanse?
Obviously my sci-fi fantasy fans are the ones I identify with, because that's what I'm a fan of, so I can have those conversations forever and be perfectly fine, and then the Santa Claus movies brought in a whole different group of people. And honestly, that was really fun, because I have had that be so unexpected. I have had these 6'5", massive, tough, really scary looking dudes come up and be like, Mrs. Claus! Like, can I get like put into this big bear hug, and I become part of this family, where you're like, oh yeah. And then Gia was something totally different. I have these lovely, delicate, beautiful women come and hug me and cry. And then I had Once Upon a Time, so I've got that. I mean, I have to tell you that they're all really interesting. I tend to love the sci-fi conversations because they go beyond me. We no longer talk about me, and we talk about the science, or what it was, or where it was going, or what it meant. And those are really fun for me, because then I get right into it, and I get to be a fan, because I am usually a fan of what I am doing, and the work that I'm doing, the people that I get to work for. So those are really fun. But I've enjoyed them all. I mean, it's such an honor to have people come up to you and talk to you about things that have moved them. I think that's one of the great gifts of this profession.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, I imagine. Well, are you doing New York Comic Con? No. Yeah.
I don't think so. No, I'm not sure. I think I'm doing something, but I'm not entirely sure. I tend to commit to things and then not think about them until right before I do them.
Like, why did I commit to this? Just like this podcast.
Well, because I'm such a homebody, right? So I'm like, but yeah, that's good.
So here at Zenescope, we are the home of sci-fi and Netflix's Van Helsing. Of course, we're all about vampire drama.
Yes.
Is there anything you can tell us about the Netflix adaptation of V.E. Schwab's First Kill? And are there any other current projects that you can share?
So First Kill, I created Marco, who is a 500-year-old vampire. And she is, First Kill is the hunters against the vampires for the most part. And it's a little, Romeo and Juliet and Juliet. It's really quite fun. And I loved playing a big old soapy 500-year-old vampire matriarch. I mean, I was desperate to play one. So here she is.
That sounds awesome. When's that come out?
In the new year. I think Felicia just delivered it. So we just wrapped only a month ago. So I'm hopeful soon. So much fun, you guys.
I'm checking that out. I love vampire shows anyway.
Yeah, I love vampire.
Thanks for being with us, Elizabeth.
Oh, I loved it, you guys. Take care of yourselves. This was really fun. You guys are my last interview of the day, so it was great joy to end this way.
I appreciate it, and we appreciate your time, and we know you're doing a lot of this, so it does mean a lot.
Witch Hunt is available in theaters, on digital, and on demand right now. And if you want to see more from Elizabeth, you can find The Expanse on Amazon Prime. Outer Banks is on Netflix. And if you're looking for a terrific fall-winter show to binge, look no further than Lost. Watch or rewatch all 6 seasons of Lost, available now on Hulu. Before we wrap this edition of Everything Zen, let's check in with Amber for some Team Keres fun facts for October.
Hiya friends, Fun Facts Guru Amber here. Can you believe the most wonderful time of the year is here? Some bloodshed, terror, and bad decisions can only mean one thing: Keres. Our Grimm Tales of Terror goddess was created back in 2013 when she was introduced in No Tomorrow. This meant-to-be one-shot was about the goddess of death who began to go a little crazy. There were some natural disasters, some lives lost, but one family man had the power to stop her. We didn't see her for a bit until her character re-emerged, more sane and stable, thank God, as we began our Grimm Tales of Terror series. Her iconic look has always been her black and red hair with mascara running down her eyes and a crow nearby, a staple by Keres creator Raven Gregory. Her original character design was by Anthony Spay. Since Grimm Tales of Terror has been released, she has had countless cameos, heeding many warnings to the fools of the world, with the series selling around 500,000 copies. Outside of Grimm Tales of Terror, she recently made her first appearance in the Grimm universe when Joe Bruscia brought her into the Hellfire series. She has also had her own one-shot when we celebrated our 10th anniversary. This dove a little into her backstory, but it just wasn't enough. So, coming this winter, she'll get a much-deserved sequel written by Pat Shand. Here's to more characters making bad decisions and more Keres warnings that usually won't end well.
And that'll do it for this edition of Everything Zen. Very special thanks to Chris, Amber, Ralph, writer Jay Sandlin, and our featured guest, Elizabeth Mitchell. I'm your host, Mark Sells. Thank you for listening. As one of the three witches said in Shakespeare's Macbeth, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." Have a safe and spirited Halloween, everyone. We'll see you all again next month, right here on Everything Zen.